What's up, Steve? How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm in my usual recovery mode from some kind of injury or surgery or something.
Tell me about it. What number knee injury is that?
Well, I injured it when I was 18, cut it with a circular saw and got gangrene in it, and I've just had my 24th knee surgery on it.
That's quite a lot. So, how long have you been training?
I had my first match when I was 14, so 54 years.
54 years. Yeah. Gotcha. So, in that time, you've gone to Worlds and competed many, many times. So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've competed in the World Championships 34 times, which is more than any American at any level. Of course, it took me 17 tries to win my first medal. So,
hey, you know what that makes you? World champion. So,
well, I wasn't world champion until a few years later. I got a bronze medal the first time,
gotcha.
and I did. I'm probably the worst wrestler who's ever won a world championship in the sport of wrestling, and I have two, one in Greco-Roman and one in freestyle.
So that's interesting, and that, like we were talking about earlier, that puts you in a very small group of people that have won in both freestyle and Greco.
Yes, because most people specialize in one or the other, and I have 14 world medals and I have 7 in each style, so I guess I'm pretty balanced.
So that's interesting that you say that. You're the worst wrestler that's ever won a world title. So what do you mean by that? Break that down.
Okay, I wrestled in high school, 9th, 10th, for the 4 years of high school. I had a career record, counting JV, of 20 wins and 20 losses. I was supposed to go wrestle, and I got pretty good my senior year, but I was supposed to go wrestle at Montclair State. I got hit by a drunk driver, spent a month in the hospital, got out and cut my knee with a circular saw a few weeks later and went back in for 2 months. So I missed my college wrestling career, and I didn't wrestle again for 15 years because when I cut the leg, I couldn't bend it for 3 years. They told me if they could save it, I'd never compete again. And I'm a little hard-headed, to say the least.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, it is.
They told you you'd never be able to compete again, and you went on to do 34, world events. So.
Well, I started feeling better. I could get some mobility back in my leg, and I coached from the time I was 18, and they had a tournament in actually Bradenton at the Sunshine State Games, and I thought, I'll just go do it for fun. And first match was with a gentleman named Bob Walker, and I didn't know who he was. And he was the United States' first ever world medal in Greco-Roman. He won a bronze medal in the Pan Am Games. It was not pretty. It's kind of a bit like being caught in a trash compactor and just get slowly crushed. But I survived it, and I started wrestling some local tournaments, and then I went to the national championships in Las Vegas, and I got second, and I thought, all right, maybe I can do this. The next year I went to the world championships in Sofia, Bulgaria, and I was 41. I thought, well, I work in construction. I'm a big, strong guy. How tough can 41-year-old men be? Yeah, well,
quite strong.
It was just ridiculous.
For anybody that doesn't wrestle and only trains with jiu-jitsu guys, you know that some of the 40-year-old black belts are quite different.
I reached out, grabbed the guy's wrist, and I'm like, oh, shit. That was bad. But my wife, I got crushed twice, and she told me I had to go back every single year till I won, which was, for a wife to say that to her husband who's doing something, awesome. That's pretty amazing. I didn't realize it would take me another 20-some years to win, but I did finally win in 2018. I beat the 2-time defending world champion from Russia who had a silver medal in the Olympics. And these, the reason, because I went 17 tournaments and could never win. And it was because our culture is to dominate in every single sport.
You're saying
Americans'
in
culture.
general?
So, you know, we're penalized in folk style for stalling, you know, and, you know, they actually make you take risks that you're never going to score.
Right.
So we just go, and I would do that and just get crushed. I mean, anytime, especially in most contact sports, if you go for an offensive move for a split second, you are out of position. And those people will make you pay. And I met a guy, Ivan Lyman. He was second on their Olympic ladder for a few years. And when he's 26, he moved here, became my practice partner, and he taught me how to wrestle like a European.
And what does that mean, to wrestle like a European?
Number one, you do not give away free points because you go after something stupid that's not there. You get behind at the World Championships by 2 or 3 points, you're done. You're not going to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that now you're panicked. You have to go after stuff, and they know it, and they're just bullfighters. They just wave their red flag, and you keep getting worse and worse. So I finally caught on the 17th try and got a world medal. And Ivan actually drove from, he had moved back, he drove from Stavropol, Russia to Poland 32 hours to coach me in his car. Awesome. And I lost to the world champion first match, and I came all the way back to the bronze medal match. And I went to go out there, and he says, if you lose this match, you just stay out there, don't come off the mat. And I beat the guy 3-0, and that was my first medal. And then I got a medal every year after that. I had figured out if you don't get scored on, it's really hard to lose. Mm-hmm. And it isn't that, most people say, oh, well, you're stalling. You're not stalling. I control their hands. I control the center of the mat, and I stay in position. If you get out of position, they're going to score. And what happens is most of the time, my opponent will get out of position because now they're frustrated. And then I try to trick them into doing something that they think is their idea, but that's actually where I wanted them to go, and then I can usually score.
Making mistakes.
Yeah, I'm really not technically that good. I have a few things I do very well. I don't beat myself usually, and I get beat by people who are just they wrestled a great match.
So you say that you're good at a few things.
Yes.
You don't have a very expansive arsenal.
I do, but most of the moves are terrible. Every high school wrestler or every wrestler in the United States knows 300 moves, and 5 of them are good. The rest of them are terrible.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same in Jiu-Jitsu. You can know 300 submissions, but if you don't have good proficiency with any of them, then you suck. Yeah. Whereas if you're really, really good at 4 submissions, then you're going to make your game around funneling people into getting that. So would you say in wrestling, you say, I'm not that good in that I only have a few good moves, but that leads you to victory. You don't take bad shots, and you funnel people into the moves that you can hit.
I can say with a great amount of confidence, I have 3 things that I do that I score with, and usually if I score, I pin them because I'm not a big point scorer. Mm-hmm. I have actually beaten 10 individual different world champions. Every single one of them was better than me. These guys have been wrestling, internationally since they were little kids. Most of the guys in the United States that I wrestled, they had 4 years of college. I had a very limited. So it took me a very long time to come up the learning curve, and I was naive enough to think that they couldn't possibly be that much better. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was wrong. It's like I snuck into this exclusive club that I didn't belong in. And I knew damn right well I didn't belong in it. But nobody ever made me feel like I didn't belong, which is our culture in wrestling. I mean, I had no business being there. And not one single person ever made me feel like I was inferior or I was out, you know. They were all so supportive. I would go to the world championships. I had 3 different world champions who crushed me, come up to me and show me the things I was doing wrong. That doesn't happen in this country. You do not teach your opponent how to beat you. Well, they do over there because they believe that it makes the sport better. And the first person...
I have seen that a few times. So one time was when Gary Tonin was grappling, I forget his name, what was his name? He was one of the Gracies, but Gary Tonin won. He won with a knee bar. And then, you know, after the match was over, they were rolling around and he was showing him how he had set it up. And I thought that was super cool. And it's happened to me a couple times with my matches where either I've lost and I asked my opponent, I was like, hey man, how did you do that? Like, that was really slick. Yeah. And they were gracious enough to show me. And a couple times where, you know, I had won and I had someone ask me like, hey, what did you do? You know, it wasn't always the person who I was grappling against, but it would be other people that I might potentially compete against one day. I'm like, yeah, I'll show you, you know, whatever. It's no big deal. It's not like I'm Gordon Ryan, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's very cool. And one aspect of wrestling culture which I really, really like is just the intrinsic value that every wrestler places in hard work and winning, which is not tied to, you know, just making money off of it or anything like that. Yeah. You know, it's a very unrewarding sport in terms of like how much money you can potentially make out of it. But people commit a lot of time and effort into becoming very good just for its own sake, and I think it produces very mentally tough people.
Well, I had a match. There's a friend of mine, Ron Ayers. He's 2 age divisions below me, you know, younger, and he's such a talent, and he's a gorilla. I mean, he's just really strong and fast. And for years, I would tell him, you know, Ron, you have to, you know, do certain things different, and I could never get him to understand. And then I wrestled him in a dual meet tournament in Las Vegas, and I mean, he was so much better than me. It wasn't even funny. He's 10 times stronger than me. I beat him 10-0. He was suicidal. He was sitting, you know, I'm a crippled up old man, and I crushed him. And he was sitting for like an hour, and I finally went over to him. I mean, he was devastated. I said, Ron, I said, I didn't score a single point on you. He looked at me like I was nuts. I said, you scored every single point I got on yourself. And then I took him aside and I showed him how I scored every single point. Well, he took it to heart, and he must have trained the entire year because I wrestled him the next year and he beat me 8-7. But it was worth it. That guy was so happy, you know, and he had come so far over something that I, you know, was able to help him with. That's what the sport is all about, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's excellent. I think like I said, I think it produces very tough people, and it's a very good, positive, supporting culture. You know, both in wrestling and in jiu-jitsu, I found the same thing in jiu-jitsu, which is good. You know, I think as a nation we want to produce really tough people that also care about each other and care about elevating everybody. You know, not just yourself. You know, so like in your school, you want to produce a culture where everybody's sharing information.
Yep.
You know, so if one person is catching a submission on everybody, right, they show everybody else, like, hey, this is how I'm doing it, right? And then that knowledge spreads. And people that go train in other schools or they go out and compete and they learn new things, they bring it back, and that makes everybody better. So I like that environment. I think like I said, I think it's conducive towards making very tough people, but also people that, you know, care about progressing everybody else around them, which is really important. I think that's what we want as a society.
I've always said, if I can coach somebody and show them one thing that helps them win a match or a bout or whatever that they wouldn't have won without that, it's worth it. It's, that's enough of a reward for me.
Yeah, it's very satisfying as a coach to see your students hit something that you
Something
showed
that
them.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you've been coaching a long time as well.
Right.
You're still competing, right? You're still
Yes.
actively competing. You're gonna compete next year, are you not?
In June, I go to Poland for the World Championships.
Awesome.
And sooner or later, I'm not going to be competitive anymore. But as long as I can be competitive, I'll keep going back.
Yeah, and you're 68. So,
Yes.
Yeah. So, and you're still competing at a world level.
Yes, and you cannot believe how many men over the age of 68 that are just unbelievably talented and just brutal. We have no idea in this country as far as fitness. They're just amazing.
Yeah. So, do you think you see a lot more older Europeans and older Asians that are just much more fit than Americans?
Oh, absolutely. But only certain countries. The Iranians don't. There are certain countries that they seem to fall apart a lot sooner because their lifestyles are, a lot of them smoke, a lot of them drink a lot. But the ones who, there's a significant number of ones that are just amazing. I mean, I just watched, a 75-year-old guy who's in the oldest age division destroy everybody in his class. And these guys are, some of them, it starts to go 66 to 75. He crushed everybody.
Wow, so he was in the oldest.
He was the oldest person
one.
he could
Wow.
be and
Yeah.
still compete, and he destroyed everybody. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you think a lot of it is lifestyle?
It is. Especially in the sport of wrestling, we go to the gym and then we work out and wrestle, or we do our jiu-jitsu. They go to the wrestling room and they wrestle. That is their exercise. That's what they do. Mm-hmm. And the vast majority of them, if they were Olympians, they are in their country's Olympic program coaching at some level their whole lives, so they never stop.
And as they're coaching, they're still
competing.
Still competing and staying in shape.
Yep.
Fantastic. So is there something else besides lifestyle that you think affects this? Like maybe training strategy? Maybe we go too hard and...
No, ego is it's a killer.
Okay.
And our culture, I mean, just look at the football players that made a good play, the professionals, look at the basketball play. Our culture is not conducive to the mental aspect of the sport of wrestling. You will not ever go out there and just dominate everybody. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't happen.
So so when you say our culture is not conducive towards that, so you lay the blame a lot on ego. So what are the things you think make people too egotistical to have longevity in their athletic ability and their ability to compete?
This is controversial, I'm sure, but for the most part, the people who have a huge ego and have to prove they're the greatest at all times do not believe in themselves.
Interesting.
So they have to tell everybody that they are. The person who's quiet, and I mean, my friend, from Russia, he never told me he got a silver medal at the Olympics. I've known him for 10 years. It's just, it's just not their way.
Interesting. Do you think some of it might just be putting on a persona, for the sake of getting viewership and things like that? Because some of that exists. Some of that exists in jiu-jitsu.
Well, Muhammad Ali
now,
invented that.
Right.
I mean, he did. He invented it.
I would say he believed in himself.
Absolutely, absolutely. My uncle met him. He actually did some work on his house when he lived in Cherry Hill, and he said that is the nicest human being he's ever met. Not a big mouth. That was what he did to get the sport back up.
So you're differentiating between persona and how someone actually is and how they act. So if how they actually act when there's no cameras around and it's just people and they're still going on about how great they are
Right.
and how they're the best of all time, you're saying, well, they don't really believe in themselves because they have to constantly say it.
For the most part.
Okay,
yeah.
but if they're putting on a persona, for the public,
For the public, that's a
and
different thing.
and then in private, they treat everyone respectfully and they don't constantly brag about themselves, and that's a different story. And you would say that person probably does believe in themselves, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, I think that's definitely a fair statement. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of times there's a huge discrepancy between how great people proclaim themselves to be if they brag constantly around everybody and how great they actually are.
And that's, and they don't, and they know how good they actually are, but they have to, try to build themselves up, I guess. I don't understand why. I'm not that way because I've been beaten so many times. I'm probably the only world champion who has a losing career record because it took me, 17 world championship tournaments and a bunch of other tournaments to even get a medal.
And yet,
that's a lot of losses.
Well, yeah, and yet, like I said before, you're a world champion.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that I think when it comes to success, you have to realize much of that comes with failure along the way. But if you eventually do succeed, then you've achieved what you set out to succeed, and your failures in the past are irrelevant.
And I got to a point where it was, well, number one, I had my favorite thing in the world that I did, stolen away from me, basically. That, and a lot of people have said, well, what if you didn't get hurt, man? Can you imagine how good you would have been? And I disagree. I don't believe I would have been anywhere near where I'm at because that created such a hunger having that stolen away that when I got a chance to go back and do it, I didn't even care. Well, of course I cared, but it wasn't even that important that I, won, every time I went out or even won when I went out. I was competing again. There was a point before I met Ivan, I knew there was zero chance I was ever going to get a world medal. There was always those 3 or 4 top tier guys I just couldn't beat. And he taught me how to do that. And it's amazing. And it's mostly a mindset, which is the hardest part. I mean, it's not wrestling, it's chess. Your sport is not Jiu-Jitsu, it's chess.
Yeah,
if you make a stupid mistake, you just lost.
Yeah.
In 2 seconds, and that's the hardest part. And
like you said, it's difficult to come back from getting scored on.
It is.
I would say wrestling has been around for much longer, and it's made its advancements a lot earlier. And perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps I'm wrong about that, but I think it is a little bit easier to come back in jiu-jitsu because you have very good submission specialists that can potentially get a submission if they're down by a lot of points. But even in jiu-jitsu, you see, once someone scores, it changes everything. Now one person is ahead, and they know it, and they have the tactical and strategic advantage that comes with that. And if they're good strategic players, they're going to use that to crush the other person. They'll either maintain the lead over the rest of the match, or in the desperation of the person that's behind, they will expand the lead, because the person will be making mistakes in order to try to catch up. Right. And so 2-0 becomes 9-0. You get your guard pass, you get mounted, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, because now you're kind of flailing around trying to get points, and you're just out of position. And it's the same thing in wrestling.
Absolutely. So you train primarily wrestling still, but you've been around a lot of jiu-jitsu people. So is there anything about jiu-jitsu that surprised you or you think is a little bit different than wrestling? Or, what similarities and differences do you see?
There's, that's difficult because I can't do any of the submission stuff because my body falls apart.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, the body part. But it appears that there are some things that are available for people in jiu-jitsu that, like I just mentioned, and I showed you about the proper technique with that figure 4 of the body, that
The
Yeah.
body triangle. from
That
jiu-jitsu.
was illegal. It was legal in high school, and I became very good at it. And then, of course, they made it illegal, in 1970, I think. So, pretty much everybody who knows how to do that efficiently is already dead. And they died of old age, and
Not you,
I'm
though.
still hanging
you
out.
outlasted them, and then you got to teach it to me.
So it's and I mean, I showed it to you, and I mean it. If you get in that position, the match is over.
It's quite brutal, and perhaps we'll do a video about this later. But basically, he does the body triangle, and he gets underhooks under the elbows and elevates the arms above the other person's head to where they can't post and they can't turn. And then he flips them over to go belly down, and then bridges in, and it feels like your back is about to snap in half. So it's definitely something that I want to try.
That's why they made it illegal in high school, because so many kids were getting hurt. I mean, it was brutal.
And it makes sense because the goal in wrestling is to pin. It's not to submit.
Right.
So in jiu-jitsu, the goal is to submit. So obviously, people are much more aware of when the pain starts to occur and how it feels when you should tap.
Yes.
And you're not the first person to show me a submission from the body triangle. So Corey Brown, who he has a school in, I believe, Cape Coral, he showed me another way to submit from the body triangle where you, instead of locking fully underneath, I'll raise my legs up so the camera can see. Instead of locking fully underneath here, he would raise this knee up to the floating rib to here, and then he would compress, get his arms to cup underneath the chin, and then bridge and extend.
Right.
And it is a brutal submission. And I've seen him have competitive success with it against other
And I
people.
didn't do that to you, but I can do that.
Is that also part of it?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Okay.
I can snap your spine and your neck.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
But
the pressure with what you did was it felt a little bit different because my arms were moved up instead of my neck. But yeah.
But if I come to your chin, you're done.
When Corey Brown did it to me in training, not only do you feel the compression on the ribs, but you also feel the extension on your lower back, and it feels like you're gonna get like a bulging disc or something like something's gonna pop from there. So it's pretty nasty. And I like that. People are always coming up with new ways to submit people, and that is a pretty fun aspect of jiu-jitsu. But so generally speaking, you see a lot of the same training methodology working for both?
Yeah, a friend of mine, he just won the world championships in freestyle, and he was 52 years old, and he made the jiu-jitsu world team in seniors, and he got a bronze medal at 52 years old, and then he won 2 world championships. He's a wrestler. He goes out there, he battles on his feet, makes sure no one gets a takedown. The last 10 seconds of the match, he shoots, gets a takedown, and he wins 2-0. And he won 2 world championships in the Masters and got a bronze medal in the seniors.
That's fantastic.
Doing
that. I'm assuming IBJJF. I'm assuming IBJJF.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
Very cool. Why would they not pull guard on him? That's what I don't understand.
Maybe
they didn't.
They don't go on the ground. If they lay on the ground, he just backs away from them, makes them come up.
Interesting. Well, it makes sense. I've noticed this, that a lot of the older guys that compete in the worlds in jiu-jitsu, you see a lot fewer guard pulls, and you see a lot more people stand up, and they like, in the gi they like to do judo, and they like to wrestle in no-gi, and the guard pulling seems to be more of a younger generation type thing, which, look, when you're in competition, do whatever strategy you think is going to lead to your victory, My gripe with it is more so when it comes to training the average individual, you want to make sure you teach them takedowns, and you want to make sure.
Well, of course, that's just. I mean, he was a wrestler who went into jiu-jitsu, and just did what and I taught him that it's
Bo
very.
Nickel has as well, and he's doing really
absolutely,
well, and he hasn't been training jiu-jitsu for very long either.
But I mean, I told Jeff, I said, it's the same thing. It's very hard to lose if you don't get scored on.
Yeah.
So he doesn't get scored on. He waits till the last 10 seconds, gets a takedown, and they raise his hand.
Don't take bad shots, right?
Don't take bad shots.
And we spoke about shooting a little bit, and how you've noticed it change a lot in both the collegiate and higher levels, where people don't drop to their knees as much. That's too risky. Unless you said before that if they're a very short, explosive guy, sometimes you can get away with it, but most people don't.
That's, it's a really good technique for those guys because they don't have the reach, but someone that's really tall, the taller you are, for the most part, you're slower than a guy that's, short and stocky and has that quick twitch muscle. I would be probably one of the slowest people that there is. I was given no quick twitch muscle when I was born. But for the most part, especially in a high school area, if a kid's knees hit the mat, there's an 80% chance he's not coming up.
Yeah.
I mean, they just don't have, especially someone that's tall, they don't have the explosive strength to come back up into them. So they have to, wrestle a different way. They have to use their length and their leverage and not put themselves in danger.
Yeah, I absolutely don't teach any of my students to shoot low like that because not only just the risk in wrestling of getting sprawled on and getting crushed, because you can't get back up, but there's also the submission risk. There's the guillotine risk. There's the Kimura trap risk. There's a lot of risk to going low. So for shots, I teach blast doubles, I teach snatch singles, duck unders are great, because it leads right to the back. Snap downs, throws, that kind of thing.
It's pretty much all that I teach.
I've taken some of the Russian stuff that you showed me, and you just showed me one modification today, which I'm excited about. I'm going to teach that. So I think those are a lot safer to the point where if you start attempting to set up this move, you are putting yourself at much less risk.
Right. Almost every offensive move that I do now, if I miss it, I'm completely away from their body and I'm not in danger.
Yeah, that seems smart to me. Why put yourself in unnecessary risk, Yeah, so another thing that I tell my students a lot is don't accept bad grips. You see in a lot of lower levels, like people just accepting collar ties and wrist grabs and things like that they shouldn't accept. And so you are accepting that you're now in an inferior position to win whatever exchange is going to happen. So you want to break out of that and re-engage on your own terms.
I never collar tie. Never.
You think you collar tying puts you at too much risk?
Absolutely. Especially if somebody knows how to do a Russian arm tie. You just gave them your arm. And you're not going to get it back if they're any good. And there's so many things that are the only thing it's good for is snapping someone down.
Yeah.
You can grab a wrist and post on their shoulder and then hit the collar tie for a snap. But if you collar tie, you have just committed your entire arm because they're already past your hand. And there's so many different ways that they can, score on you.
So collar tie is very situational.
I don't ever do it. If I'm going to snap somebody down, I go right from the shoulder to the collar and snap. Otherwise, I don't even get there.
Are there?
And I don't teach it.
Interesting. So are there other?
Let me finish one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you collar tie somebody and your head is now on this side of their head, you're blind. You can't see what's coming. You just took away your arm. And you took away your vision. If you post, you can see them.
Is this like a common thing that competitors of your skill believe? Like, do you see a lot less collar ties?
They all think I'm nuts. They all collar tie.
Okay.
And I usually beat most of them because they collar tie. So it's okay. Give me keep collar tie and show me how strong you are, and I'll take a Russian tie and throw you.
Fair enough.
And that's a little arrogant, I know, but it's like these guys are so much better than me and they just do it anyway. It's like, really? But
I mean, if you're having success with all the counters, then I guess it makes sense, right?
Yeah. Well, it isn't even that. It's that I had so little success with, all my great offensive moves for so many years. They worked on everybody who was not experienced. They worked on people who were out of position all the time. But when I'd wrestle somebody that was good, I'd just get pounded. So you stop doing it. You only slam your hand in the door, 2 or 3 times in a row before it starts to hurt.
So when it comes to American training strategy with wrestling, besides just the overemphasis on constant offense and putting yourself out of position, what are some other things maybe you would change? And maybe what are some things that we do well that you think we should continue to do?
Well, when I cut my leg, I can't run. If a grizzly bear's chasing me, we're going to fight. I can't run.
Makes you carry a big pistol.
Yes. And I had a major problem getting enough endurance to finish a match because I can't run. And
can you swim?
Yeah, but I'm a lousy swimmer. So one of my friends introduced me to a Schwinn Airdyne, which is the bicycle with the big fan on the front, and you pump, and it works every part of your body. You can't coast. And I can get my heart rate up so fast on one of those things, and I do intervals, and I've never lost a match since I started doing that because I got tired. I used to run in high school, and you run 15, 20 miles. It just doesn't. The intervals on that Schwinn Airdyne simulate a wrestling match. You flurry, you go slow. You flurry, you go slow.
Yeah, that always made a lot of sense to me.
And that piece of equipment is probably, most people don't like them because you can't cheat. You can't coast. You can't, you do, I'll do, 10-second sprints, get 25 cranks with each sprint, 10 seconds slow, 10 seconds fast. I'll do, and I can get my heart rate. I'm an old man. I can get my heart rate up to almost 180 in 12 minutes. If you can get your heart rate up higher in practice than you can get it in a 6-minute match or whatever your matches are, you will never get tired. Because what happens is when you hit your maximum heart rate, you turn into a jellyfish. Your body just shuts down, and you've seen it happen. These guys, all of a sudden they've gotten their heart rate up higher than they have gotten it in practice, and their body's defense mechanism thinks you're going to die, even if it's only 150, because it hasn't been there before. So I'll get my heart rate up as high as I can get it when I'm sure I can't get it that high in a match. And once once I'm in that shape, I only have to get it there one time a week for a couple seconds. And
Gotcha.
And I have never lost a match because I got tired.
So that really intensive interval training,
Yes.
You do it once a week. You get your heart rate is
Well,
very,
once
very
I'm
high.
there, it takes me a few weeks to get, like I'm in the off season. I can't do it all year round, but once I get to a point.
So you have to work your cardio up to the point
Right,
where,
right.
now I can.
Now I can just, not have to do it as much. And I wrestled, I was 52 years old. I wrestled in the Open in the state championships, and the next oldest guy was 30. And my endurance was better than everybody there. I never even I had 7 matches in an hour and a half and never was breathing hard.
So I would imagine it's difficult to do that in training, especially if you're much better than the people you're training against. I've argued that you're too good at controlling the pace.
Yes, I can stall. I can just coast and practice, which
Right.
isn't conducive to helping your
Right,
endurance.
and even if you're trying not to, like you said,
Right.
if you're trying to purposely explode into stuff to work your cardio, you might be developing bad habits.
You're definitely developing bad habits.
Yeah,
but,
so So you would make a strong case for, if you want to have really, really good cardio, it needs to happen outside of the
Yes.
training room. You need
Yes.
to do interval training.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have a bike, like you said, what was it called?
It's a Schwinn Airdyne.
Okay.
Mine is like 20 years old.
Gotcha. So if you don't have one of those, would you say interval sprints is another way you might be able to do it?
That particular piece of equipment works your hands, your arms, your shoulders, your back, your legs, your feet. So you're
So it simulates more
involving
what you're gonna feel
that
in
is
wrestling.
what you're doing when you're wrestling. and it gets your heart rate up like that.
I'm gonna ask my fiance for a Christmas present. I think that might be it. So.
Now you can buy one for probably $200 on the internet because people buy them. They're $700 and some dollars. They use them 4 times. They never get on them again because the average person who just wants to, do exercise, they're miserable.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it's way less miserable than
yeah,
getting beat because
yeah.
you got too tired to finish.
Yeah, I think if you're just starting out into venturing into exercise, try to do something a little bit more engaging and fun,
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely for a competitor, that sounds extremely useful. So
Every college uses them.
every college.
Every college I've been to, they have a whole line of them in their room. There's a reason for that. And they can get any piece of equipment they want.
Yeah.
But I have never been on a piece of equipment that is like that. And
That is something to be said about American wrestlers, I think. And they have fantastic cardio.
Yes.
But part of it might be because they're trained, like you said, to constantly be on offense. And so that requires a lot
That's
of
part
effort.
of it. That's part of it. I definitely don't need the endurance that the guys who are just nothing but offense need.
But you still want it to be high because
because
then you can weather any storm that's thrown at you.
Yes, that's true.
Makes sense. Because if you're not being the hyper-offensive person, then the pace can be dictated by the person who is, and you need to be able to keep up with it.
Yes.
So that you can implement your counters and what you like to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's exactly what I do. And it's now, and being able to counter a lot of stuff is helped me mentally so much it's not even funny. I mean, even if I'm losing, like I wrestled the guy from Russia. I've wrestled him 12 times, and he beat me 7, I beat him 5. All right, he's still better than me, which he is. But I can find ways to beat him. He was beating me 6-0 at the break at Nationals one time because he comes and does our Nationals sometimes. And at no time in my head did I think I was going to lose that match, which is weird. I mean, I'm getting killed. But there's just a calmness about knowing you're not going to get tired, knowing that you made 3 mistakes and gave him 3 takedowns, and I ended up beating him 7-6. I turned him with like 3 seconds left in the match to beat him 7-6. And at no time in my head did I think, and I've done this before and I have lost. So I mean, it's not a foolproof thing, but it was just it enabled me to just relax and focus on the next move I have to make or the next thing I have to do, and turned out.
Yeah, your thinking is purely strategic.
Yes,
and
before
not worrying about, okay, how do I stop myself from getting tired?
Yes, or how do I score points? I mean, it used to be when I got behind, it was over. My brain turns to mush. You can't focus on anything. You just start flailing around. And I've been able to, and it's taken a long time for me to develop that. But that's probably one of my biggest assets. A friend of mine from England gave me a great compliment. I mean, I've wrestled. I mean, I'm the oldest person who has ever wrestled in the U.S. Open in Greco-Roman and freestyle. Which was quite stupid, by the way. You should not wrestle against the best 20-something-year-old men in the world or in the United States when you're 60.
How old
I was 63 when I did.
Jesus.
Yeah, when I did Greco, and 62 when I did freestyle. It was really stupid, but.
Did you get hurt?
No, they were nice to me. They could have hurt me.
Yeah.
It's because the speed is what goes away. Those guys are so fast. But we were trying to prove a point. They took away our age of division, the world sanction did, for 2 years, and said we were too old to ever compete. And we decided, okay, if a friend of mine and I decided that if we're not allowed to wrestle where we're supposed to, we will wrestle where we're not supposed to. It's the U.S. Open. They can't stop us from wrestling in it. And we did. And both of us were world champions. Neither one of us scored a point on anybody. But we got our tournament back the next year.
Fantastic.
You know, so, and I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but
It might have.
you know,
Civil
it's
disobedience is good.
yeah,
You know?
or stupidity.
Well, sometimes they go hand in hand.
I wrestled.
You need to be a little hard-headed sometimes.
I wrestled Frankie Francois, who was the number 2 seeded guy in the United States in Greco, and he threw me for 5 up in the air and caught me and put me down out of bounds, so I didn't get hurt.
That's very nice of him.
It was, because he could have probably killed me, and that was when I thought, okay, this was really stupid.
Yeah.
And I thanked him, by the way, after the match.
And I don't think, I think the vast majority of people would have done something like that, but you know, there's that risk you get that one guy.
Yes, that's exactly right. And there's always the one guy who has an ego, who's really not that good, but he's strong enough and you know, aggressive enough to hurt somebody like me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And going into that, you know, because that's a great courtesy, I think, that he did against you, you know, to make sure that you didn't get hurt, because he knows he's going to win.
Yeah.
You know, he knows he's going to win, so he's out of courtesy, making sure he doesn't hurt you. So one thing that I would like to see more of in amateur tournaments is, one, less ego from the people that are being put into submissions, have them tap earlier so they don't get hurt. But 2, also for the people in amateur divisions, I'm talking like white or blue belts in local tournaments, you know, if you've got some guy in an Americana and he's not tapping, like, please don't rip it. You know, that guy probably has to go to work the next day.
Yeah.
You know, even if you lose the match because of it, you know, you can at least have a conversation with the person later and be like, hey, listen, you know, just so you know, you can take this however you want, but I could have broken your shoulder, and I didn't, and I think you should tap sooner next time. You know, and maybe they'll tell you to F off or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the very least, you're trying to prevent this person from not being able to go to work, which doesn't help anybody. You know, now you can come back and can compete against him later when he's a more mature
that's
individual.
very true. That happened to me.
At the pro level, where there's money involved, totally different story. You know, but at the amateur level, I think that's something we could do with more of.
I wrestled in the national championships one year, and I was wrestling, you know, a friend of mine who's also world champion, and I have a throw that I don't do anymore for this reason. Is I threw it off a Russian arm tie and elevated his leg, and he came down straight on top of his head, and I watched him bend his neck over. I thought he broke his neck, and he couldn't finish the match, and that scared me so bad, because you know it just, I've never done the move again, you know, and I could do it to pretty much everybody, but it's not worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And so, you know, then there's guys who would have just, you know, done it a zillion more times. I mean, they do exist. I know some of them. So.
Well, I think it's a good approach, you know, especially because, you know, you're competing with people that you're probably going to continue to see every year for the next 10 years.
I've wrestled that guy 18 times. So we've been wrestling for a long time. And actually, most of these people, even the ones on the world level, I've known them for 20 years. You know, it's all the same people. Every one of them is good. Everybody's strong. Everybody knows how to wrestle. So it's fun. I mean, the guy from Russia that I beat, and the guy who got third, he had, at that time, he's a world champion too. I was a world champion, so was a Russian. But the guy from Poland had 9 silver medals in the world, had never won. And but the 3 of us, you know, we get together after the match, and the Russian, you know, pointed to the guy from Poland. He goes, sometimes he wins. Pointed at me, he goes, sometimes you win. And he pointed to himself, sometimes I win. And not one time in all the years that we've all wrestled each other has any of us been mad at the other one. You're mad at yourself because you're stupid sometimes, but you know, and it's just.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's
when I lose, I don't ever get mad at my opponents.
No.
I'm like,
yeah,
God, I'm such an idiot. How did I let this happen?
So, and it's just, you know, and they're some of my best friends in the world, you know, and I have a lot of them overseas that, you know, they're just, that this particular sport has, and I'm sure your sport is the same. There are very few people that are just complete jerks in it, because
Oh yeah, 100%.
the second you are, there's somebody that just makes you pay dearly.
Yeah, I've made a lot of friends competing, you know, and obviously we don't get to see each other very often now. I have my own school, but when I was actively competing frequently, it's like, you know, you'd go to the tournament and a lot of the same people would be there,
Yeah.
you know, which is pretty cool. And you know, perhaps next year, towards the end of the year, I might start again to compete and go back into the circuit, but it's been nice to take a break and focus on just coaching and building up another group of people that, you know, eventually some of them might decide to be competitors and get really good. And one thing I actually really like to do is coaching kids. And in the beginning when I first started coaching, like I liked coaching the adults way more than I did the kids, because I was like, oh, the kids, you know, like you got
coach a team of 6-year-olds.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like it's like, oh man, I just got to constantly get on them about their behavior. Like they won't line up the right way. It takes forever to teach them this very simple thing. But eventually, you know, I got a system down of how I did it, and a very rigid structural, you know, behavioral correction strategy that I implement in my classes. And so then behavior didn't become an issue, because, you know, the kids know that if you step out of line, you know, okay, now you got to do a ton of squats, push-ups, you know, that kind of thing. And the kids that have been there long enough and they understand this, right, they serve to keep the other kids in line that are pretty new. Or it's maybe better to say that the kids that are new pick up on the behavior of everyone that's been around for a long time. And so they start to mimic that behavior. And so it's gotten a lot easier, and I've started to enjoy coaching my competitive kids a lot more. And some of them are getting really, really good. And it's
of course, they have a good coach.
Oh, well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. But it's really cool to see, especially the kids that in the beginning were super shy and just completely no athleticism, you know? And so you start to develop a little bit of athleticism in them just from the various drills and strengthening exercises that they're doing in class. Then they start getting some skill. Oh, now they're starting to get submissions. This is really cool.
Yeah.
That's a really cool transition, because submissions are very difficult to do. They require a lot from somebody. You got to take somebody down, you got to pass their guard, you got to pin them, and then you got to deal with their resistances when you're trying to set up the submission. So when a kid starts getting submissions, that means they've probably been there for a good amount of time, and they're, you know, they're getting pretty good at the other skills. So watching them grow, it's going to be interesting, because, you know, they're going to be adults one day, and if they decide to continue competing, you know, they're going to be monsters. And so I see a lot of value now in teaching the next generation, because not only are you building more competitors for the next generation and growing the sport, those kids eventually, some of them might decide to open up their own schools, or, you know, they might decide to have a professional competitive career, you know, which is still very difficult to do in jiu-jitsu, but it's getting a lot easier every year, you know, as it continues to grow. And, you know, it just spreads the sport into the wider culture. And that's something I really, really want to do, not just for jiu-jitsu. I think wrestling is super valuable too. And if we had a greater proportion of the country do it, I think that would be a great thing, as long as the meritocratic principles that underlie each martial art stay intact and we don't let outside influences corrupt it, you know.
I've had, I think, 10 kids that I coached when they were in high school, and they became high school coaches, you know, when they got older.
That's fantastic.
I watched Jared Frayer. He was an Olympian at two Olympics ago, and he and my son wrestled each other every single weekend since they were 7 years old. And Jared told me when he was 10 he was going to wrestle in the Olympics, and at 36 he made the Olympic team.
That's awesome.
And it's like, yeah, this is a kid I watched grow up. I watched Cale Sanderson, Penn State's coach. He's the same age as my son.
Everybody knows about Cale Sanderson.
And well, they don't know completely about him, because the reason he is the best wrestling coach in the United States is because when he was a kid, his two brothers were genetic freaks. He was not. And he wasn't as good as them. And he had to learn the sport. He had to learn what made the moves work. And every year his brothers would win nationals, and he'd do okay, but he'd never win. And then he became a genetic freak. He matured later, so he has the ability to analyze every single move, understand what makes a move work, what is available, what is not available. And this is why he takes a nice, an excellent wrestler and turns him into a superstar in a matter of months. Because and the reason he was so successful is he then became that, superior athlete who had all the knowledge. And that's,
He developed the technical and strategic skills first, and then built his athleticism later.
The kids who are athletically superior in most cases don't really learn the ins and outs of whatever sport they're in because they can just do it.
Yeah.
The kids who can't do it have to learn. I had no athletic ability, and I had to learn exactly what was available and figure out ways to overcome the fact that I wasn't a genetic freak.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I am. I've had so many body parts fixed.
And yet you're still kicking. Yeah, so maybe you are a genetic freak.
Yeah, somewhat.
Not in the sense that maybe you originally thought.
Right, right.
But yeah, that's I've definitely found that to be true. I was not very athletic or strong or anything like that when I started wrestling, or certainly when I did jiu-jitsu. When I competed, I was usually like 165 pounds, and now I've put on some size and strength, and I'm like 190 pounds.
Right.
And I want to continue to do that. I want to get to like 220, 225, see how I feel, and maybe then I'll cut down. We'll see. But
your knees will go bad.
My knees will go bad?
No one is meant to, that I can see, to carry that kind of weight, because your joints, for the most part, they can take it for a while, but then you see the bigger guys, everything's sore.
Yeah, makes sense.
But you can do it for a little while, then just cut back down.
Yeah, I could. I just want to see what it feels like.
Yeah.
Look, I'm 28. I want to see how far I can take this.
No.
And then if it's too far and I'm starting to get pain in my body, then I'll cut down. I think I could probably get to 200, 205 and feel really good. And then if 225, like you said, if I'm starting to get joint pain and, other things like that
well, here's the good news.
I wouldn't want, then I'll stop.
Here's the good news. You're 28. You have a long time to get your dream.
Certainly.
I got my life dream.
I've got 40 years to go until
I'm
your age.
I got my life dream at 64 years old. I had almost given up, and I wanted it so bad for so many years that when I actually finally won the first time, I wasn't even that happy. It was like a relief. Second one I won, I was happy. But the first one, it was like, oh my God, because I lost so many times where I should have won or had a chance to win, that you start to think, I'm never going to win this thing. And I finally got it, and it was just such a relief.
Yeah, I certainly.
But it's never too late to get your dream, by the way.
I think that's a great message, and I agree. I certainly had much more of a competitive drive before I opened my school, and then that took a big, obviously it's a big responsibility. You got a lot of students that you got to take care of and make sure you're doing your best job for them. Right. But that competitive fire is still a little bit underneath the surface. I've had to shift my focus on the school, but it's still there. And when I get to the point where my school is big enough and I've developed some of my students to the point where I'm comfortable with them running beginners classes or taking over for me if I need to train or do anything like that, then perhaps I'll start to get back into it more frequent and start competing with more frequency. But yeah, it's encouraging to hear that I've got 40 years. I got a long time.
Yeah, you're a youngster.
Yeah, and I certainly think, in 40 years, jiu-jitsu is going to be much bigger than it is now, and I hope wrestling is too. I hope wrestling is a lot bigger than it is now, and I'm sure there will be divisions for when I'm in my 60s if I still want to go out and compete.
There you have them right now.
Yeah, they do. So
And
I'm
you know,
sure they'll still be there, and they'll be
they
bigger.
will still be there.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll still be there, and they'll be bigger. And that's great because I think a lot of people, and like you mentioned in Europe, like you said, not every country, but some specific countries, you get a lot of older people, like around your age or older, that are just still super athletic, super strong, able to do very athletic activities like wrestling and be fine. And I don't see that as much in the U.S., and I hope that changes, you know? So.
Yeah, our lifestyle makes it really difficult. I mean, look at the food we eat. They don't eat that food over there.
Yeah, they're much more strict with their health regulations and such.
And I don't know that maybe it's because a lot of that stuff just isn't available over there. But our diet is scary, you know.
Yeah. Well, hopefully by the time I start getting into my 50s and 60s, that starts to change a little bit. You know, we'll see. But hey, listen, you're in America. You're here. You're still kicking at 68.
I am.
Doing all this stuff, so it can be done.
Shouldn't be, but.
Is there anything with your diet that you do in particular to make sure that you can keep doing this?
I'm fortunate. I pretty much hate all food. I'm tactile defensive, which means if there's any kind of spice or seasoning, it overpowers the food. My grandmother had it, I had it, so I don't eat anything that's spicy. I don't eat any fried food. I don't eat, I'll have a filet mignon twice a year. I don't eat red meat. And it's just because I don't really like it, you know.
So what do you eat?
Chicken, more chicken, fish, you know. That's some derivative of that, sometimes some pork, but not very often.
Okay, so for protein, chicken, fish.
Yeah.
Do you eat like rice? Do you eat any carbs, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I do. I like carbs, you know, which I know they're not conducive to, you know, whatever, but I mean, I'll eat spaghetti or noodles or things like that. I eat rice.
Gotcha.
White rice,
Well,
brown
hey,
rice.
you seem like you're still doing okay, so
Yeah.
it must not be too bad, right?
Well, apparently. So.
Well, Steve, thanks a lot, man. It was a great
it's my
talk.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
a great talk. I super appreciate it.
Okay.
I hope you guys took a lot of stuff from that. All right. You know, Steve is a fantastic guy. He's a world champion, and he's been competing at a very high level for a long time. And you've told me before, you really value being a coach. And,
of course.
And you've been doing that for a very long time as well. And so you've gotten people to the Olympics, you know, or at least played a major role in that. So I think, you know, my listeners, you can hopefully take a lot from Steve and what we talked about.
And actually, the ones I get the most enjoyment out of are kids that are, well, I was not super athletic, okay? So the kid who is probably not going to be, you know, a state champion or a superstar, but if I can get him to a level where he has a really nice career and he, you know, it's so rewarding.
Absolutely.
My oldest son wrestled for he had absolutely no athletic ability when he was young. And when he started wrestling, he didn't win a match for 3 years. That was painful to watch. And he actually
For 3 years is a long time.
Oh God! It was the first time he finally won. It was so such a reward.
I went a year and a half, so I only went half that long.
Yeah. So he, you know, his goal for his wrestling career was to make it to states his senior year, and he made it to states his senior year and won a match. So for him, that, you know, that was such an incredible. And in his little brother, he could beat everybody in the world practically without even trying. And so that made it a lot harder on him, you know. Now, if I could have taken the drive in my oldest son and put it in his younger brother, he'd have been an Olympic champion, because he just wouldn't practice or do anything. He could just do it. It was quite annoying as a coach, by the way.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well,
But-
I plan on coaching my own kids in, when we have kids in jiu-jitsu too. And
Yep.
I hope they're coachable. I think sometimes it's hard for parents that coach their own kids.
Here's what's hard. It's hard for you to not push them too much. I was guilty of that, for sure. Because you want them to do well so badly that
go
I
too
see it all the
far and you
time. You
make it
go
less
too
fun
far,
for them.
it's no longer fun. When I coach little kids, or I have people who have small children that they're 5, 6, 7 years old, I tell them, I said, look, you want them to have the most amount of fun they can have on the mat every single time they set foot. Because what'll happen, it doesn't matter if they learn a single move until they're like 10 or 12 years old. You want them to have a great time every time they set foot on the mat, because that kid will learn to love the sport. And somebody who loves the sport becomes good.
Almost every single class, I play 1 or 2 games with my kids before we leave.
Yep.
Because when we do drills, sometimes the kids go with, tough partners and they lose. And,
Yeah.
losing is upsetting, especially for a young kid.
Yes, it is.
But the last memory of class is them running around and screaming and having fun because they were playing dodgeball or we're playing freeze tag or whatever.
Foot tag's a really good one.
Oh yeah, I remember you told me that.
Yeah,
That's a good,
foot
that's
tag.
a good one.
You got to tag their feet, and you tag their feet, they're out, and the last guy in wins.
Yeah, that's one I'm gonna start doing.
Yep.
I remember we talked about that one like a long time ago, like a year ago. But yeah, that's a good drill too for.
Yeah, I mean it's
mobility.
agility. They can move their feet out of the way. They can, it's a great. They're practicing and they don't even know it.
Gotcha. I'll have to frame it that way. Well, Steve, thanks a ton, man.
Okay,
Appreciate you
thank
sitting
you.
down with
Yep,
me.
no problem.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure you share this video, especially if you're a competitor, someone who's a competitor, or somebody who's just looking to get into wrestling and jiu-jitsu. What can you expect from the culture? Well, I think it's a lot of very positive things. So we want to get more people involved. And again, if you're a competitor, I think there's a lot of valuable advice that Steve just gave that will help you. Certainly things that I think are going to help me if I decide to return into a more competitive career. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. Make sure you subscribe if you're new. Make sure you smash the thumbs up button, and I'll see you guys later.